is Kinsey Burns, and my topic was on education and children in foster care. My big questions were my specific topic of interest was how children who grow up in foster care are affected in terms of their development, short-term and long-term. And then my relation to the chapter is what role does education play on the successfulness rate of children who grow up in foster care? My article was titled, What Happens to Foster Kids? Educational Experiences of a Random Sample of Foster Care Youth in a Matched Group of Non-Foster Care Youth by Wendy Whitting-Blom. It was published in February 1997 from the Child and Adolescent Social Work Journal. And the goal of the study, it was a longitudinal study that compared a group of children in foster care to a group of children who grew up in an intact family home. And the study compared the educational experiences of the two groups of kids. The importance of the study was that many children grow up in foster care and they struggle with stability in their lives. The instability can lead to many emotional, mental, and physical complications, thus halting their educational development. This topic is important because it brings attention to the issues within child welfare policy and practice that prohibit foster children from becoming successful later in life. And a quote by Blom from our article is that there have been no real-time longitudinal studies that compared foster children with non-foster children who shared other characteristics and were sampled at the same time with the same instruments. So the methods of the study was that beginning in 1980, there was a base year survey collected where respondents were sophomores in high school, and the survey was conducted by the Department of Education. Basically, the study surveyed 167 foster youth, and they were matched with a set of 167 children who were living in intact homes, which meant that they were at least living with one biological parent. Follow-up surveys were conducted in 1982, 1984, and 1986 to follow up on the youth's educational progress, and data was collected for all 334 students, and controls were set for the testing measures, meaning that they would compare students who were in the same educational bracket. So if they scored similarly on math tests, and those two children would be compared. They wouldn't compare children who scored low on math to a non-foster youth who scored high in math. The strengths of the study were that it was a longitudinal design, so it allowed for real-time data collection. This also avoided the issue of retrospective surveys, since comparisons and expectations were able to be discussed between the two groups at the same time. The limitations of the study did include that the sample size of the study was quite small. Therefore, it was not representative of the larger foster care youth population. Below on table 1, you could see the sample size by group and year. And so therefore, you could see that the reason the numbers get smaller is because children and youth dropped out of the study over the 6-year time span. The results of the study found that educational achievement of foster care is low compared to non-foster youth. Foster youth dropped out of school at higher rates than the comparative children. So 37% of the 167 foster youth dropped out of the survey before the second survey could be conducted, which was in 1982, compared with only 16% of non-foster youth who had dropped out by the time of the second survey. Foster youth were less likely to receive high school diplomas or their GED. Graduated foster youth received significantly less financial support from their foster parents. Foster youth had more disciplinary issues due to interruptions in education, such as changing schools. Adults of foster care youth were less likely to monitor homework and schoolwork. And 23% of foster youth had not received their diploma or GED by the survey conducted in 1986, which would have been 4 years after their graduation from high school, compared to only 7% of non-foster youth who had not received a diploma or GED. These graphs here show, and figure 1 on the left shows that the foster youth versus non-foster youth and their educational success. So the foster care group is seen by the white bars, and the comparison group, which is the non-foster youth, is seen by the black bars. And just from this graph, you could tell, aside from the subject moved, because oftentimes foster care youth are to move homes more often than if they were to be in an intact family, just due to their foster families not being able to provide care for them for extended periods of times. Other than that, the comparison group exceeded the expectations compared to the foster care group on figure 1. And on figure 2, it touches on the subject of comparison of parental attention to homework by year and group. So like the study had said, foster parents were less likely to be involved in the foster youth's schoolwork and education. And that is also demonstrated on the graph here. We could see that it is true that the foster parents were not as involved in the child's educational life as compared to the comparison mothers and fathers. The big takeaway from this study is that children who grow up in foster care are less likely to receive proper support for their education, which leads to them dropping out and never obtaining a high school diploma or GED. Non-foster youth have much higher success rates even when living in a single-parent home. For our children to succeed, they need a stable, loving, and nurturing environment that allows for them to thrive in all areas of life, but most importantly, in their education. Thank you.